Welcome to the video. This is gonna be a birth story all about our second born child, Shay Glory. This is our first daughter, and we did not know the gender ahead of time of her birth. She's about 3.5 weeks old now, so I'm just gonna kind of tell the story of how she made her way into the world. So she was set to be due on March 5th. So on March 5th, I was 40 weeks. And up until that point, I did not have any signs of labor, no contractions. I didn't feel like the baby was low at all. And I went to my 40-week appointment on March 8th. So I was 3 days overdue. And at that appointment, still, I didn't have any signs. I did let my doctor check me for the first time at that appointment, and he said I was between 1 to 2 centimeters dilated. He marked it down as a 2, and he said I was 70% effaced. So my cervix was thinning and favorable. So he did offer me a membrane sweep. I did let him do that. And I know they say either it will work or it won't. And if it does work, it will, the baby would come within like the next day or two. And I definitely think it worked, because when I left that appointment, I felt a lot more pressure almost immediately. And I felt like the baby was low, like much lower. So from that appointment, I went to Target and I got some dates, because my friend told me that that can also help induce labor. And this was a Tuesday, so I worked that day and I went about my way, and I told multiple people that I thought that the baby was either gonna come that day or the next day. And sure enough, that is what happened. So that night I went home, slept, but I definitely went to bed feeling like I wouldn't be surprised if I woke up and went into labor. The next morning we got up, we brought my son to daycare, we went and my husband and I got Starbucks, and he had to do an errand at the DMV, and we made it home at like 8:30 in the morning, and that was when I had my first contraction. I didn't really think like for sure labor was happening, but as the morning progressed, I had more and more contractions, and I think around like 10 a.m. I started to time the contractions on an app. I think I deleted it, but it's just like the contractions app, and all you do is push start and it will time it. When you stop, it keeps track of all your contractions, the time and the length. So I started doing that, and as the late morning and early afternoon progressed, they were happening more regularly and they were getting stronger. I did have something on my work calendar for that afternoon that I was supposed to leave the house, but I decided I was just gonna stay home and work from home. So I was working from home, I was doing emails and making phone calls, and then in between those things, I told myself I was going to get labor going by exercising, like around the house, like doing chores. And then I would go upstairs, like pack the bag, I curled my hair. And at this point I knew for sure that I was gonna have the baby. Like I just could tell that this was the start of labor. So my mom had already been planning to bring lunch down, and she was also dropping me off something that I wanted to borrow from her during labor. It was a cooling towel. So she was coming down, and I pretty much called her and said like, hurry up, I'm having the baby, but I really want to have this lunch. So she brought us over lunch around noon, and I told my husband, put your out of the office message on after lunch because the baby's coming. And he definitely didn't take me seriously and thought that I was being dramatic and that I wasn't actually in labor, but I knew I was. Keep in mind, like, I didn't have any other signs. Like, I didn't lose my mucus plug, I didn't break my water yet, so it was just the contractions. And then we were all having lunch together. We had soup and sandwich from a local place. And during that, I called my OB clinic and I told them how far apart my contractions were and how long they were lasting, which they were at that time about like 4 minutes apart and lasting between like 30 seconds to a minute. And they said, definitely come in and we think it's time. So we finished our lunch, and around 1:15 we left our house on March 9th, and we got to the hospital. And if you've ever had a baby, you know, like the whole process just takes a long time going to the hospital, because first you have to check in at the hospital and sign all the paperwork and do the registration. Then you go up to labor and delivery and they put you in the triage room. So I was in the triage room and they checked me and I was 5 centimeters dilated, and they said, okay, you're for sure staying. So then they got us settled into a room, and at that time, I want to say it was like 3 in the afternoon, and my personal OB came and said hi to me, and we talked about the plan, and I was positive for group B strep, so I needed an antibiotic so that the baby wouldn't contract the virus when I was giving birth. So that all plays into the plan, but my OB said, I'm so bummed that you need those antibiotics, because if you didn't, I would break your water right now, and I know that the baby would be here within a couple hours, but I needed the antibiotics. So we had to wait to break my water, because if they would have broken my water and I didn't have the antibiotics in me long enough before the baby was born, they knew that once they broke the water that the baby would come quickly, so they needed to give it time before they did that for the antibiotics to kick in. So anyways, we did the antibiotics and then talked about the plan, and he said that he was not going to be on call that night, but a different doctor was, and she would probably break my water around like 5:36 p.m. So that is exactly what happened, and in between that time I didn't really progress anymore because the water still being in me was keeping the baby from dropping lower. So I pretty much stayed at a 5 like all until they broke my water. So we walked the halls, bounced on the ball, just kind of like labored. I really didn't want to get the epidural yet because I didn't want to be stuck in the bed, which is what happened with my first labor and delivery. I had the epidural and the baby didn't come for a long time. So we walked, we just hung out. The boys' state hockey tournament was going on, so we watched that all afternoon. And then at 5:30, the doctor came in and she said, okay, I'm breaking your water now. And I still hadn't had the epidural, and I was really afraid for her to break the water before I got the epidural, for things to move too fast. And she said, we're not here to eat or hang out, we're here to have a baby, so get on the bed, I'm breaking your water now. And that's exactly what happened. She broke my water, and that was at 5:30 p.m. She checked, I think they checked me right before that, and I was still at a 5. And sure enough, the contractions started so heavy, and like almost immediately for the next hour, they were so intense. Okay, I'm just gonna add in here that I forgot to mention that during my labor and delivery, I was only allowed to have one person or one visitor there. So it was my husband. If I wanted to have like a doula or a midwife, they would have been allowed. But during the intense labor process of like this 1 hour when the contractions were really bad, I just want to say that I couldn't have done it without my husband, and having him there to support me and just like help me during that time, because I was being totally crazy, like what you see on the movies, like yelling and just saying, do this, don't do that, don't talk, blah blah blah. And I don't know how people do it without having anybody there with them. So he was like a huge part of getting through that intense time. I felt like I couldn't handle them, like to a certain point, like nothing felt comfortable. I pretty much stayed on the ball, that was the most comfortable, and then I had my husband like pushing on my lower back or massaging my upper back. But it got to a point where I was pretty much screaming to make sure that the anesthesiologist was coming up to give me the epidural, and he was taking a long time. We called him pretty shortly after they broke my water, and he didn't probably get up there until 6:30, so it was an hour later. But during that hour, like, that was just insane. Like I said, that was the craziest hour of my life, and if I could endure that pain, then I could do anything. And they checked me right after I got the epidural, and I was like 9.5 centimeters. So pretty much once my water broke until like I got the epidural an hour later, like I went from a 5 to a 9.5. So I got my epidural, that went great, no problems. I was so happy once I had that. Like I said, I got that at about 6:30, but it probably took, by the time they did the whole like procedure and then it kicked in, it probably was like 7 by the time it really kicked in. And then they checked me, like I said, I was 9.5, and they said, okay, we're just gonna let this like epidural sink in before we start letting you push. And it was probably 7:15, and they had me start doing practice pushes, and then they had the doctor come in, and finally it was showtime and game time. So I was pushing, and the whole time during that, they could just tell me, baby has so much hair, the baby has a lot of hair, and that's what they kept telling me. And as I was pushing, my epidural worked great. I just was feeling the pressure of the baby and the baby's head. And then they found out why it was taking me longer to get her out. She was sunny side up or face up, so I guess that's a little more difficult to push the baby out, because apparently, like, the way the head is positioned, it gets like kind of stuck or caught on the pelvic bone. And so finally she came out at 8:09 p.m., which was funny because right before I started pushing, we all guessed what time the baby would be born, my husband, myself, and the nurse, and I guessed 8:09 exactly. So and then since she was face up, the doctor grabbed her, and like I was the first one to see her because the doctor had her under her arms, I guess, and so I was the first one to see that she had female parts. So I found out that she was a girl first, which was like super exciting. With my son, he was born face down, so like everybody else saw that he was a boy before I did, and then they told me, but I was the one that saw that she was a girl. And so I'm like, a girl, and then I just wanted confirmation from the doctor, and I'm like, is it a girl? And sure enough, you know, she was a girl. So here's Miss Shay. And when she was born, she was 8 pounds 1 ounce and 21.5 inches long. So she's really long to me. She seemed long and just absolutely perfect. Like, she was born with just, in my opinion, like my son came out and he had a lot of, I guess, trauma from me being in labor for so long, but she came out and to me she just looked absolutely like perfect. Like, she didn't have any bruising, and her head was just perfectly shaped and just so sweet, and just happy to have a healthy baby in that moment. It was so emotional. It's like the best feeling in the world when they lay the baby on your chest, and she was screaming and crying, which was a good sign. And because she was healthy, I got to have her on me for a long time. I want to say over an hour, and before they took her to like weigh her and everything. And she did latch and nurse right away for about like 45 minutes, and that was really good. She didn't have any issues with that. What else can I say? Yeah, of course she did come out with a lot of hair. And some things that we chose to do differently with the baby this time around, just a few things. We did delayed cord clamping, so we waited until the cord was done pulsing before they clamped and cut the cord, just to allow her to get the most nutrients and benefit from that. And then we did opt out of the eye serum or ointment that they usually do on the newborn babies. We felt like we didn't need to do that for hers. And then we did skip a bath in the hospital, so we did not give her a bath, just to let the white vernix like soak into her skin and get the benefits from that. So those were the things we did differently. And then we also did ask to do all the testing that we could do in our room. So she did her hearing test in the room, and they couldn't do the cardiac test. They had to take her for that. And also what was different this time, we only stayed in the hospital for like literally 24 hours after she was born. So she was born on a Wednesday night at 8:09, and we left the hospital at 10 p.m. on Thursday the 10th. And that was definitely nice overall. It was nice, but it also made the experience feel a lot more overwhelming because it felt like everything happened so fast and like it was such a blur. But it was a lot more relaxing and restful to come home and be home with her. So overall, I would say I had a really good birth experience with her. There was a couple like unfortunate things. The fact that my doctor didn't get to deliver her, which was a bummer. And then with that, the doctor that did deliver her was a little more strict and not as personable. So we didn't get to have our camera filming during the birth. And then she did make me wear a mask while I was pushing. And she, like I said, broke my water exactly when she wanted to versus like waiting a little bit until I had got my epidural. But other than that, everything went great with me. I forgot to mention I didn't tear at all, which was amazing. Like I did tear with my son, my first birth, but not with her, and the difference that it has made in the healing process and just like recovery time and feeling overall comfortable way quicker has been like amazing. So that was super fortunate. But anyways, even though the doctor wasn't necessarily my favorite, we were both healthy and everything went good, so I'm just grateful for that. And I can't believe how quick the time is going and that she's already almost gonna be a month old here soon. So I think that that's pretty much the gist of the story of her labor and delivery and birth and how Miss Shay came into the world. And we're so happy to have her here with us and have been loving our time with her. So she did end up coming 4 days past her due date, so she came at 40 weeks, 4 days, but it was definitely worth the wait for her, all said and done. So I'll see if I can show her a little better. She's so sweet. She's like such a great baby, so easy. She's been a great eater and great sleeper. Say bye. Can you say bye?